Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns, and even more so after this past week, the Anti-Federalist, they absolutely got it right. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I'm very delighted that you are back with me again, and we have a number of different things to cover, but I know what's on everyone's mind is the election and the continuation of what it has transpired. In reality, as much as I was disappointed on Wednesday morning, I have to say it wasn't unexpected. It just made sense to me that although there's over 5 million more votes for Donald Trump than there was during the 2016 election cycle, that evil had its mind set. And I'm including the Republicans in with the Democrats in relationship to exercising itself, themselves, the swamp, the establishment, whatever you want to call it. It's the evil that has been allowed into this nation. That this was the buildup. This was the buildup. It was the buildup for the last 100 years plus years to get to this point of taking, and what I've talked about over and over again for the last 5 years is the Kozak plan, pressure from below, pressure from above, and the takeover of our republic through the use of constitutional means and the election. So, am I overly surprised? No. Am I disappointed in that we didn't see and prayerfully, as one of the references in the program noted in the other, what was it, that I showed a YouTube video that you can go and check out, and a blog, that prayerfully, disappointed. God didn't answer the prayer that Donald Trump would just have that major sweep in relationship to how this election should have gone. But what we have had and what we've talked about for over 20 years now, I know I've only been on the programming, the blog, YouTube, and so on and so forth for the last 5 years plus. But for over 20 plus years, I've been talking about this whole issue of socialism and communism not having gone away at the time of Reagan, but having shifted like a shapeshifter, its forms and its means and methodology. And where we're going to go with this is political theology, folks, political theology, and it is placed squarely on the pulpits. Now, there is oodles and oodles of documentation that you have to go to samueladamsreturns.net to see for this program, and I know, what do? I have to trust that you will find something in that whole list of documentation that will, kind of pique your fancy, that you'll go and read it, that it's there because the information has been in place, and we're going to cover some of it, for over 80 years. And we're going to cover a number of different things, and one of the places that I'd really like to start in relationship to this is an Anti-Federalist, and this was written December 28, 1787, by James Winthrop. He went by the pseudonym in this whole process of the Anti-Federalist papers as Agrippa. Now, understand, when he's looking at here is the new Constitution and it being implemented, and looking at what are those holes that can cause problems then and in the future. And the future being we. We're the future from 1787, I would think. So here we have Agrippa, and he's writing to the people, and Agrippa was predominantly from Philadelphia, so Pennsylvania, and I think this is key to not just our immigration battle, but it is key, because there was an immigration battle at that time, but it is key to one of the reasons we're in the condition we're in, and I'll point that out when we get into this section of this paragraph. But this is a key paragraph that I really want us to focus on as we look at the Anti-federalists and then jump into many modern types of writings. So Agrippa writes to the people, "We come now to the second and last article of complaint against the present Confederation." Remember, that's why they came together to form a new constitution, was because they had problems with the Confederation, the Articles of Confederation. So this complaint, which is that Congress has not the sole power to regulate the intercourse between us and foreigners. Such a power extends not only to war and peace, but to trade and naturalization. This last article ought never to be given them, that meaning the new Congress, the new Constitution. For though most of the states may be willing for certain reasons to receive foreigners as citizens, yet reasons of equal weight may induce other states, differently circumstanced, to keep their blood pure. Pennsylvania has chosen to receive all that would come there. Let any indifferent person judge whether that state, in point of morals, pay attention, in morals, education, energy, is equal to any of the eastern states, the small state of Rhode Island only excepted. Pennsylvania, in the course of a century, has acquired her present extent and population at the expense of religion and good morals. The eastern states have, by keeping separate from the foreign mixtures, acquired their present greatness in the course of a century and a half, and have preserved their religion and morals. They have also preserved that manly virtue which is equally fitted for rendering them respectable in war and industrious in peace. So, not saying to be an isolationist. So, do we isolate the country in totality? No, we can't do that, and especially in this modern age. But the point being given here is that when you just bring in this influx of people, and as President Trump has said, who do not love the fundamentals of America, what you have is bringing these folks in at the expense of religion and good morals. I challenge you again. I've challenged you at this before we even get to the pulpits. I challenge you to go look at the heads of the majority of the tech companies in Silicon Valley. They are not people that have last names that have any connection or love for America. Oh, Tom, you're being, what is that, xenophobic? No, I'm not. The fact and reality is that we have allowed so many people to come into this country over especially the last 150 years, to the extent that we got to let all those brainiacs in, and we should get them at a cheaper rate, and we should do that, and we should. When the dollar became the god of our economy and nation, then what we have are the godless that become the leaders within the context of our present situation. That holds true also into the pulpits. Now, I think that I've said this for many, many years, and I just heard it recently in a lecture that was given. That the link is there. I think that once again, out of everything that's been going on with the political theology, is that Doug Wilson knocks it out of the park when he's talking about republics and what democracies are and what does that mean from the point of even theocracy. You've heard me say on this program many times over the years is that all politics is religious one way or another. That's why I've kind of focused on these segments this year in particular on political theology. It all comes down to, in summation, while we're getting close to the end of this first segment, what God is leading out there. What God is the God that holds the religion that drives the political machines, policy, and bureaucracy. Is it mammon, money, power? Is it environmentalism? Is it the other isms? Is it communism? Is it socialism? Or where is the God of the Reformation, the biblical God of all eternity, all power, all creation, when it comes to how we reference our political theology? It really does come down to what do you believe? And then is what the Anti-federalists always talked about, can the pulpits maintain the true, pure religion so that we would have a moral and virtuous society? Well, as we look around the streets and we see that, in fact, there is the gross cheating that what is his name? Oh, yeah, Joe Biden said that he had the greatest team in place for taking and cheating in the election cycle, and as the votes would go. Yeah, he said that. Go check it out. Go find it for yourself about Joe Biden talking about his team for voter fraud. And that's what he called it. He has the greatest team to do voter fraud that was ever assembled. So when you now know that, and it's validated in his own words, it goes, well, where's his religion? Well, we're seeing that based off of Hunter's laptop, or can you see it in sniffing the hair of girls and women? No, I know that doesn't tell someone's religion, but maybe it does. But when you're power hungry and you're money hungry and you don't have any means and mechanisms to take and teach true religion and morality, wow, you got some hurt bumps going on there. So as we move into the second and third segment, we have more to cover than I have time to talk about. And some of the things that we will discuss is, in recent history, a book that was actually published in 1934. And we're going to talk about the Christian socialism. And what does that mean? We're going to talk about communism in the churches. We're going to talk about the pulpits not willing to take and bring that to bear for the last 50 to 100 years. And in fact, the pulpits have been co-conspirators, knowingly or as dupes. And, I saw that here in a local major megachurch that we used to go to that was run by Alistair Begg, where he flat out said, and we'll cover this more, communism's dead. And so anybody that talks about that, he laughs at. And Sam Adams said, look out. When you're not teaching that true religion, you're going to get confusion. So come on back in the next segment as we pick it up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-federalists were very clear that they predicted where we are today. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and delighted to have you back. And all of you folks out there at Liberty Works Radio Network, I am so happy to be with you on these 3 time slots. I'm not going to try and give a analysis of the election. There's all the other pundits out there that do way better than myself and have resources better than myself to be able to articulate and pontificate where things may or may not go. But what I've researched for you this week, and that there's others on the live programming during the week that take similar approaches, is something interesting regarding that political theology, regarding, once again, what's happened within the pulpits. So what I'd like you to do, all of you listeners at Liberty Works Radio Network, is to take and find that special button there, contribute. Look at all the other programming. If you're new to the network, there's a lot out there during the week. And you know what? I'm delighted to be a part of it. So let's kind of get back to where we left off to some degree. We're going to get to some degree because I think where I left off was pointing specifically to a church and its senior pastor, well-known national senior pastor that is in the same ilk as John Piper and that whole cadre that have caused the major confusions within the context of Christianity in relationship to voting for Donald Trump. And it's interesting. I'll put up a Pew report. There's actually a Pew report that's there in the archives at Samuel Adams Returns. There it is, samueladamsreturns.net. Check it out. And the archives for this program. And if you received the promo for the program, you'll see that there's a reference to a Pew report in relationship to 2020 and Christians voting and how that's all broken out. But I wanted to drill down a little bit more succinctly on my topic in that political theology, enemies within the pulpits. Now, it's interesting that we've seen some new movies and videos. I guess there's a new book out talking about, what's happened to the pulpits. There's other references that I'll give you where I've mentioned much before about what happened with the Federal Council of Churches as it became the National Council of Churches. And so we'll reference a couple things in there, but we don't want to belabor that. I do want to bring you to this reference that I found pretty new to me. And, oh, that's right. I wanted to mention that Trevor Loudon has a video out of a similar title about the enemies in the church. So I'm calling it the enemies in the pulpit, but I think he calls it something similar to that. Anyway, this little book here that was actually published in 1934 is called The Red Network, a who's who and handbook of radicalism for patriots by Elizabeth Dilling. And this is a copyright 1934, very, very interesting. And what she actually went through 3 iterations in 1934, April, May, and July of the book. And it's dedicated to professional patriots. I don't know, are there any out there? We seem to have a lot of them, and I think that's part of the confusion is they've become professionals more than, but they're patriots, but they become professionals, and so we see in today's environment that a lot of the pundits make a lot of money, and that's a good thing. Hey, it's a free market, right? It should be a fair market. Anyway, in her dedication, she says, without committing them to its statements, this book is admirably dedicated to all those sincere fighters for American liberty and Christian principles who, because of their opposition to red propaganda and the new social order of Marx and Lenin, are denounced as professional patriots, super patriots, 100 percenters, patrioteers, and Tories by their red opponents. Isn't that interesting that a lot of those names, Kat, we hear some of those again, now. We don't hear the professional patriot as much as we hear super patriots, 100 percenters. The Tories and the patrioteers, that doesn't ring out there all that much. But anyway, that's who she dedicated this to. And the idea is that there was so much information that came about even then, before the 1950s. But this was all about that early warning in 1934 that she was bringing out in relationship to communist socialist world conspiracy. Now you got to remember, conspiracy is really a well thought out plan. It is not the tinfoil hat stuff. It's a well thought out plan. And that, this whole idea of the four horsemen, atheism, immorality, class hatred, and pacifism for the sake of red revolution is boring within the churches, schools, and government, and is undermining America like a cancerous growth. All right, I throw up my hands. So this was 1934. Kath and I have been talking about this for over 20 years. You have all the modern pundits that are finally willing to use the word socialism and communism. Donald Trump finally was able to use the word socialism and communism during this. But yet at the pulpits, you have the likes of Alistair Begg, because Kath and I sat there and heard the sermon where he said, communism is dead, and all you fools who keep talking about communism and socialism and all of that, ha, 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 you're fools. It's dead. Forget it. He's not the only one. And I'm not trying to pick on him, but you have to understand that when somebody has the level of influence of that nature from a pulpit and a Bible-only church, there's tens of thousands of people that are influenced. Whereas when I talk about the extensibility of the gospel, where is it that the likes of Piper and Begg and that ilk, where have they been for the last 30 years in establishing a fundamental moral people that are active in every aspect of life? That means that they engage in business, they engage in politics, they engage in law, and they understand what we were talking about in the first segment, that the God of religion, the God of politics, the God of business, the God of money, the God of your family, the God of the legal system is, if you're a Christian or claim to be a Christian, and should be if you're someone that claims to be a follower of Jesus Christ, there it is, should be Jesus Christ. It should be the eternal God of the Bible without question. But as is pointed out, which I appreciate, I've pointed it out over the last 20 years, and which is better articulated in the seminar that Doug Wilson gives. I like that term about political professionals, because when you start looking at why we haven't made so many grounds, is that we have maybe too many what do they call those? The single issue Christians. So the question was posed, and I thought was well discussed, is that why have we not had victory over the abortion issue? Oh, why have we not had that? The point is that, well, if we had won over the abortion issue, what would all the abortion groups, anti-abortion groups, do? What issue would they, jump to? Where would they drive their revenue? Uh, how many of them are, in fact, really interested in applying all biblical principles to take back and institute and legally present the means and mechanisms for um, destroying abortion? Anyway, I can go on that. I think that I've mentioned that to you before. Let me go here just real quick and see if I have that reference that I was not intending. It's not in your notes at all. And it is in here on loning.com in the commentary section, is on the abortion. The Supreme Court opinions like Roe versus Wade aren't law at all. First, we defend law, then we defend life, what the pro-life movement needs after decades of failure. The extremely good article on that, which I believe that is brought out in different ways. So Kath has given me the 3-minute warning, and I haven't even gotten through your 1934 little book here. It's interesting is that some of the titles in here, you're going to have to go look at the chapters. It's a PDF. You can download the references there. It's only, just right about, 350 some pages. All right. Not a long read. And the point of the matter is that this lady takes and lays out in 1934 the assaults on the pulpits and the people who have instituted that, names, and organizations, who are the communist organizations, talking about their positions and how they actually get involved, what they've done to take and construct a means and mechanism to infiltrate religion, infiltrate our churches, infiltrate our pulpits, to the extent that modern pastors are no more than dupes. They don't even know that anymore, which was the intention here, was that socialism, the utopia of science by Engels, talks about how you take and move these revolutionary ideas even into the idea of church. And, you sit here and you look at this and you go, my goodness gracious, this is more than what you thought about. In here is a whole section called Christian Socialism. And the facts are that you can't be a Christian, so you can't vote for a Democrat because they are gone all the way to a socialist. Well, I'm sure many of you, well, not those that listen to this program, but there's many out there that did vote Democrat because they didn't like whatever reasons. Who? Donald Trump. And it's, stimulated by the likes of John Piper and the non-committals of Alistair Begg and all of that ilk. And I'm saying that ilk because I'm only using those as primary names when there's so many others behind it. We're down to the last few seconds here, and what we're going to have to do is in the third segment try and cover the specifics more on, yes, Christian socialism, because we're there. We have so much. And the Federal and National Council of Churches has facilitated that with some key figures. I can't get to all of that. I broached some of it within the promo. It's in the portion there on this program at samueladamsreturns.net. And bottom line is Sam Adams actually got it right, and so did Agrippa and those anti-federalists. Where's your God? Where's your morals? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. This third segment, those anti-federalists got it right. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and we're just going to jump into it. Hey, you screaming eagles, welcome back to this third segment. And if you missed some of the references to the material by missing out on that second segment, please go to samueladamsreturns.net. It's right up there. And hit that archive, listen to the whole podcast. Or if you want to see my smiling face and all the fun expressions that go with how I present the program, then please go to the YouTube channel. And when you get there, hey, everybody, go to the YouTube channel just because. And what do they say? Click like, hit the bell, and yeah, you'll get the updates when they come. And mostly everything is only once a week. But I have to say that before we get into it, and again, the references are there. If we don't get through all this material, which we never do or will, is that I'm really having to buckle down on myself in the midst of all of the other jamming that we're doing. So go to pepper-licious.com if you're in Ohio and help support what we do on the programming. But as we're jamming, I'm still doing all of this other stuff so that we get these programs out. One of the things that I have been remiss in is taking and completing the last few chapters of the Chaplains and Clergy of the Revolution. So I am going to have to find some time, because I think it's critical that we look at what we're talking about here, the political theology, enemies in the pulpit, and see that during that first Great Awakening and during those times of the revolutionary period, the pulpits were the movers, the motivators, those that brought that total and complete truth into every aspect of people's lives, including politics. Yeah, Sam Adams knew that. Sam Adams was very clear that we had to have a moral people to govern, not just for the Constitution that came out in 87, self-governance as well as local governance and business and every aspect of life. All right, let's go back to the Red Network for a couple of moments. Then I want to jump over to something that John Stormer said, and none dare call it treason. And I want to remind you that everything that is going on is the Kozak plan, and that has been referenced over and over. Go to the website and look at Kozak plan, K-O-Z-A-K plan, and on the website you'll find all the other program references there of taking over a country with not a shot fired. That's exactly where we're at. And not going to belabor that. So anyway, here we have in 1934 that this young lady was talking about modernist Protestant churches united under the influence of the radical Federal Council of Churches, penetrated with communistic propaganda, unsure of allegiance to Christian doctrines, are weak and divided foes. Oh, the enemies in the pulpit, weak and divided foes, when not actual allies of the advancing menace of Bolshevism and atheism now assailing America from the schools and universities, the press, the pulpit, the lecture platform, and radical politicians. Kath, can you believe this? I mean, what have we been hearing for the last 10 years. Let me see. In 10 years, and she flashes up 10 minutes. Did you plan it that way? Did we work this one out, before we did the program so that we hit that? Yeah, 10. Oh, folks, you guys see we're flashing our fingers at 10 here. It's pretty comical. But anyway, so we're all thinking here in this modern age, and all of these kids under 30 and all of these, we're hearing the likes of, I don't know, the Candace Owens, the other, youth jockeys out there that are the named pundits. Oh, look at this. We got all these things going on in schools and universities. And look at the press in America now. Oh, how evil the press is. The lecture platform. The radicals, AOC and her communist cadre. Well, it's really Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and their communist cadre. They've been around a lot longer than the AOCs. And the communist cadre, well, wait a minute, 1934. What's Nancy Pelosi, about 80-some years old? I think she's pushing 78, 79. She's pushing 80. Okay. 1934 is a little bit before her time. I know my mom was born in 32. So, all right. So we'll give Pelosi and some of them. But there are those that when you look at this in 1934 writing, we're talking about the influences of the radical federal, now it's the National Council of Churches and the United Nations. And they penetrated with communist propaganda. They had these unsure allegiances to Christian doctrine. Wow. So, I talked about even some of that starting in Unitarianism way back in the 1700s, where they were on, or not were on, their Christian doctrine. And then weak and divided foes, and they're, advancing the menace of Bolshevism, atheism, and now assailing America. Schools, universities, the press, the pulpit, and the lecture platform. The radical politicians. I'm not going to go through here. There's these two definite items in relationship to Christians that put together the social gospel. Number one, clearly, is that Marxism, socialism, all of those isms like that are atheism. Plain out, simple. So if you vote Democrat anytime in the future, because somebody out there may have voted Democrat and called themselves a Christian now, you just voted for atheism. And if you say you're a Christian and you've been voting as a Democrat, well, you're the ones that were helpful, besides all of those pastor ilk that I already mentioned, that have facilitated atheism and socialism. And secondly, is that when you take, and as she says here, both socialism and communism are Marxism, the only difference being that socialism covers over its atheism with a garnishment of Christianity. Oh my goodness gracious, a garnishment of Christianity. When camouflage is expedient, while communism just flat does not. So here you have the Chi-Coms, they're flat out. Now you have the Russians, they hide it. Now you have the Democrat Party that hides it. You have Biden and Pelosi that hide it under Catholicism. Oh, wait a minute. They're socialists. Cooperation with Marxism is cooperation with atheism. Christ warned us against this, and I'll leave it at that. So there's so much more in here, and getting into how did this whole idea, how did the socialists come in here? How did they work with this whole idea of the churches to develop this idea of the social gospel and Christian socialism? There tons of stuff. What do we got? 5 minutes left? We got 5.5 minutes. All right, 5.5 minutes. Here we go. We're going to skip over to one of my favorites. I've referenced it over and over and over, is none other than None Dare Call It Treason by John Stormer. And, there's a whole section in here he takes and talks about the corrupting, subverting, not just corrupting, but the subversion of our religious heritage. And the idea is a follow-through from 1934, and this was 1963. So let's see, 34, just about 30 years later, same words, same things. We didn't learn we did not learn in a less than a full 40-year generational timestamp. And John Stormer is reiterating all of this, but now he's actually putting names to name. And two of the key figures that manipulated and revolutionized religion in America, especially in the Protestant churches, because the Jesuits did it in the Catholic Church. My dad and I talk about that all the time. The Jesuits are flat out evil, despicable. They do good on teaching people how to learn. But other than that, they are the most conniving conspirators that there are, well, besides the other Democrats. But this Dr. Walter Rauschenbusch and Dr. Harry F. Ward. Harry F. Ward was identified as a communist. Harry F. Ward he was profound in a lot of what was going on in the Federal and National Council of Churches. He wrote a lot of the things that have driven those churches far away from biblical truth. And what you have here also is what Rauschenbusch, responsible for the concept of social salvation. What does that mean? You're going to have to read a little bit more. But social salvation is a collectivist theology. Where's your God? Who's your God? Who is your political God? What politics do you stand on that identifies with what you believe? I'm a Democrat. Really? Well, that means I'm an atheist. I hate God. I despise everything that would be morally good for any type of governance. Oh no, I'm an environmentalist. Oh yes, that's that tree over there. I'll worship that. Yeah, I get it. Our nation was founded in such a way that it is only, and people freak out on the whole thing about theocracy. And again, you're going to have to go listen to somebody smarter than me. But the bottom line is theocracy, that means God's in charge. So is God in charge of your life? And if he's in charge of your life, do you apply that? If you're a business person, no matter what you do in your work, and especially if you're a politician, or you can do party politics and say, I'm a Christian. Big difference, folks, big difference. And I think that's the key element. It is not about this idea of the constitutionalist, or just all constitutionalist, or what do they call all of those folks with Jim Jordan and all of them? They're in Congress. I can't even remember right now because that's a nice name. But the bottom line is, are you living the extensibility of the gospel and representing that in your decision making in everything you do, in every action that is taken in relationship to governance? I think that's one of the vetting questions that you should consider when you look at your political leaders. Where are they in some sense of reference towards the God of the Bible? Are they going to be holy men? No, not necessarily. You're not going to get that. The churches don't produce that. The pulpits don't produce that. And you know what? From Rauschenbaum and Ward, many thousands of pastors have been influenced by their teaching. And thousands of pastors influence thousands of pastors, to the point that we have the social gospel, and we have those that are ascribing to critical race theory. But that's a whole nother story, and something that you should probably listen to Cody Leibold about, because he does a really good job on Christian intellectuals. But in these last 30 seconds, I don't have time to go over everything I wanted to. I touch on a few other things there at the website, but go to SamuelAdamsReturns.net, sign up for the newsletter, get a hold of me, help out with how we support the program, and get out now and find out who's your God of your life and your politics and that of your pastors and pulpits.